So welcome to the Node.js package maintenance team meeting for September 24th, 2019. We'll follow our standard agenda, which was in issue 259 within the repo. To start with, does anybody have any announcements that they'd like to share? Okay, no announcements this week. So on to the issues which were tagged for the agenda. So the first one was number 241. This is future direction for the support field, and I think there's been quite a bit of discussion. I think the most of that discussion has been around whether, static data in the package.json file or a dynamic like a dynamic link that changes. I know some of that also spilled out into an issue in the npm repo as well. So I don't know if anybody wants to sort of recap where we're at or anything like that.
Is it safe to say that the main topic of discussion here is whether to include the information inline in the support JSON file and therefore versioned along the way versus externalizing it through a URL somewhere?
I think that's the main, yeah, it's like whether it should be, I think on there's some, on one side, it's kind of like, hey, no, it needs to be part of the package. It needs to be, you don't need to go anywhere else. There is the, well, we need to have updated information. So it would have to be something like, well, you consider the latest published version of the package, the version you would need, which means if you've got tools that want to look at that data, they need to be able to efficiently get the latest version if it's published in the package. The alternate would be viewpoint or discussion point would be, well, that data can change at any time, so it doesn't really make sense to be part of the package. If you provide a dynamic link, that's going to be better. But then there's concerns over, well, what happens if that link is stale, or now you got to go to more places to get the data, and it's sort of those are the two sides where the discussion's happening. We had landed in what we'd written before, that it would be inline in the package JSON with, potential. I think the way it's done is it could be externalized into a link later on, and that field could be extended to be what it is today or a link that would to point to that information. But the discussions initially were that we wouldn't do that until there was a way to, like through npm, more easily get just that one file versus having to, external file if it was part of the package. Or come to, I think that was the main thing, is like, okay, if we do make it a link, then it should at least be possible to make it a link within the package, but we'd want a way in npm to get that other file efficiently. And I think I'm looking for it because I thought it was in that issue, was the link to the issue being discussed in the npm tracker. Right, okay, there it is. So open this one. So it's 246, where I think, there were some comments that it's, it's data that could change. So we're hoping that then that would sort of move back into the discussion in this issue, although I haven't seen that happen since the last comments about 2 weeks ago in the npm issue.
Is there not an option to kind of make it optional where we can go out with the direction that it should be either or, and then just wait for tools to catch up? For example, if it's part of package.json, then when you npm in it, maybe today we don't have an option to fill in the blank, and later on we put in a pull request to fill in the blank as part of that question answer that you go through when you npm in it. But in the meantime, is there any reason not to go out with a starting spec, have people try it and implement it, and do either or, put a link or directly insert it into the JSON? Is there any reason we have to dictate it like at the outset?
I think we'd need input from the people who've had fairly strong views one way or the other. I'm not sure that we have them at today's meeting. So maybe if you want to comment in that issue as a, hey, is, you know, since we seem to have two ways we can go, and there's you know, relatively strong arguments either way. What if we go out with, you know, both options and then see what people end up using? Does anybody here have concerns with that approach that we should talk through? Or
I think that's probably the best approach. We can't force the issue, but we can essentially run a popularity contest and just let it be chosen. That's true open source.
It's true. I guess it does mean that tools will like need to be able to go out to you know, to additional links to get information if it's not in the package that Jason did. But I probably lean towards, let's see if the, you know, if we had the two options, letting the community choose. But you know, maybe.
Sorry,
go ahead.
there are two communities here though. There's the community that works in the open source and is in smaller startups or companies. But for large enterprise organizations, anything that involves going outside of the company is problematic, meaning you may or may not be able to do that. Okay?
Right, and I guess that's the challenge between the package JSON. Like,
Yeah.
if you've already got the package, you've at least got that data.
Yeah.
Now, you may still, I mean, realistically though, you probably still need to go outside the organization to get the latest version so that you could check if there's new data, right?
That's already pretty much standard for everybody right now, though. If it's inside of a package.json, the pattern or the rules for that have been established at everybody's companies already.
Right. So, I mean, that would be the argument, I think, that would have pushed us in the way of where we're at today in terms of the wording that it's inline only.
Glenn, I would suggest perhaps adding that particular context you just described just in the comment thread so it doesn't get lost.
On 246 or 241?
241.
Okay, I'll do that.
Interesting that the numbers are very close to each other too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, just to clarify, that was the direction, Michael, right? To use 241 for the discussion?
Yeah, yes, right. Like, I think it kind of hijacked 246 in the NPM repo, and that, I think, is like the original posters trying to repurpose it back to what they were trying to discuss.
Yeah.
So I think it's better. So if you, I mean, Isaac seemed to have some good comment suggestions. I don't know if you can encourage him to bring that over to 241. Sort of, I think we're hoping for that to happen, and we can sort of push that forward again. Because again, we still have that, yeah, like we could say like you could do either or, but then like Glenn just pointed out, there's a potential concern that, okay, does that make it harder for the people consuming the data, right?
So in the enterprise, if there's a URL, it can generally be followed, but they'd have to essentially take it out of the environment where how it's being used, meaning we'd have to like cut a URL, go to an environment where we can get outside past the firewalls, and then go look at it. The tools would certainly not work.
Right.
That we have very limited, in most enterprises, once you get to a certain size, there are a very limited number of places that let you go.
Is that, I mean, we're a huge company. Obviously, production systems can't go anywhere, but I'm imagining this tool would be run not in the production system, but in your development or, you know, basically when you're saying, are we okay with these packages, not when I'm actually using them in production. So for me, at least, on my local desktop, I could easily run them. I don't know if that holds true in your organization or not. No, okay. So even in the developer, like the developer wouldn't be able to say, okay, I'm going to run this, and so that means that things like even the package installs are carefully handled. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. So I think that's quite common. So a lot of companies are we would like to be more involved in what the things like we do have these restrictions as maybe one of the reasons that they're not involved. And as we bring them in, we'll see more of the things within our certain sort of fintech communities that restricts us, and we are trying to work on. But so it's no reason not to have a link, but it just requires a little bit more work for someone to use it. They may just have to go to a different environment than their work one, which most of us do have in fintech, but it does require disconnecting and reconnecting systems. But
Right,
let's
okay.
not go down this path too far. I'll take the comment on 241, as Ahmed has said, and I'll type it out.
Okay, so I think that's really the next step. Like, I think if we can come to conclusion on that last issue, then we do have another issue, which is like putting together a blog post and so forth. But I think in that blog post, it would be nice to say, you know, this is the way it is. Here's all the discussion. Here's even an issue. You can go read about it, but this is what we've decided to do for now as we go out. Any other comments, suggestions, discussion on that one for the meeting today? Okay. I'm just going to take a quick note here. Discussed. Options. Okay, the next one is standard grammar keywords for reference to reference node release lines. This is 236. And I think we can probably close this one.
I think there were 2 pull requests related to that, right? We need to merge them both.
Right, so which 2 are those? Those are add support target detail.
Yeah, 253 and 257.
Okay, so 253, let's just see where we're at on that one. So, and 257, right, and I think it does, right. Manuel was going to merge my comments from my changes from 257 into 253, and then we can land that. Okay, maybe I'll ping.
Can we try just changing the target branch and see if that, oh, right, we need to, sorry, yeah, no.
Okay, oops, sorry, I just got to comment on the right one. I wonder if I could do it the other way. Okay, I'm just going to comment. Okay, so I just added a comment. So, okay, so we'll just say just waiting. I'm going to say have consensus with release, have 2 PRs to land, reflect this discussions, then this can close.
I know you had a PR open on the release group something. Is that linked somewhere?
Yeah, let me find that. I think I remember I have an action as well too. I'm not sure it was a PR or I took the action to.
I'm just looking to, because we're changing some details there, I think we should try to get Renovate and others on board with the changes we're making.
Right, so where was that? Sorry, I'm just trying to find that. Was that maybe? Closed. Yeah, there was an issue. Sorry, I'm just looking for the issue, which was, what would we call that? It would be, something we, nope, open. Okay, define a word for all current releases, right. Okay, so yes, I took this one. I can say, maybe we can paste that into, sorry, I'll paste it into the chat to start, but there's this one, and then I'll go back to finding the issue we had in here. Okay. Right, Michael also needs. Right, so yeah, I need to do a PR to update based on the common terminology in some of the node repos. So thanks. Also PR to update. I think there is an issue for, okay, there's one worth, there's not, okay, sorry. And I'm just looking at what we've got on the agenda to see if, because there was an interesting one there where we're having a discussion that I was thinking maybe we could come to a closure on as well. That was around the time permitting, I think. Just looking for that one.
That's not on the agenda, but yeah,
it's not on the agenda, but I think it's worth just touching on right now. When I'm just having trouble finding it.
And there's a pull request, the 255.
Okay, is that it? Right, 255. So this is the one where we had best effort, and I think somebody pointed out that actually can cause some grief legally in terms of best effort can be interpreted as trying hard, and somebody could legally try to demand performance. So there's a bit of a bike shed in terms of names. Manuel, basically did a vote, and the two preferred ones were time permitting and what's the other one? As available. So I don't know if everybody here has chimed in on that.
The thing that we're trying to avoid with best effort is like being able to legally prove that arguably they could have tried harder. And I think
Right.
time permitting is equally verifiably equally easy to verify is not true. Like I saw him grab a Coke, at the grocery store. Here's the picture.
Yeah, although as available, you could say the same thing, right? You were available.
Yeah. I like no SLA. I mean, these are all opinions, like you said, bike shedding. I'm not 100% sure if there's a exact right thing to do. And if someone's looking to, play around with the wording to get what they want, they're going to do it whether we pick a good phrase or not. Hopefully people are more reasonable than that. It is open source software. So, but I like no SLA. That one to me seems like the most like legally non-binding. I have promised nothing to you sort of a phrasing that doesn't actually say I promise nothing. So
I promise something, but not nothing.
yeah.
But I can't be held to it.
Right.
Yeah.
Don't hold me to this, but I will
Right.
help you out and I will consider trying to do it. No SLA seems pretty good. But again,
Yeah, I got 0. There weren't any votes in the original vote, though.
I see.
Are there any lawyers available to chime in anywhere in the foundation or anywhere?
Yeah, if we want to, we could ask that to the foundation, on the foundation side, like of these, is there a concern there at all? We could even ask.
Halfway down. There, I did no SLA there. No SLA emoji. It's loading.
So maybe that's the next step, is I could ask the question to see if we could get some advice from the foundation side, is like, this is the way we've got 431. This is the concern that was expressed. Is there a concern here, and is there a recommendation that would nudge it in the direction of any one versus another? Does that make sense?
For sure. I like that.
It sounds like a good next step. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I like that we had a vote, but I'm not sure it's clear to everybody who might have an opinion about it that the vote was occurring the way that it's currently structured. Maybe if we have some sort of other link as opposed to like inline in the chat that we could share in the channels and things like that, and get buy-in from people who may or may not be involved in this particular pull request. Does that make sense?
We could do that. We will go to a next round when we publicize it more broadly, right? So I think the key thing is to make sure that the people putting this together are comfortable with what we've got.
Proposal. Yeah.
I'm just worried the more, we can go broad on every single thing, but then that'll stretch things out. And
I don't know what the conversation was the last time we set up the voting, or if there was like an actual open discussion about it.
I think it's just been the discussion in the issue itself, where it was like, the issue was open, people were suggesting different things. So Emmanuel said, okay, let's try, to see if we have any consensus on this front.
The reason I asked, or the reason I'm wondering about it, is because I see votes for multiple options.
Right.
And I'm not sure. Yeah, it might make more sense for us to like pick one as opposed to like voting for all of them and figure out which one edged out the rest with like the top vote, something like that. For everybody to like vote on one as opposed to like voting on multiple. I don't know. That might not make as much sense. But to your point, it would be nice if as a group, deciding on what our initial proposal is, we made like a hard set decision about what we wanted and locked it in, as opposed to leaving it open to, well, I mean, I said that one, but I also said the other one, and I was really leaning towards the other one. I'm sorry everything went horribly wrong.
Right. So, okay, so do we want to try and choose one before we go and get advice as to whether it's an issue or not? Like it's kind of hard to tell whether any of these are really better, right?
Right. I'm not 100% sure how we will measure that objectively.
I think we can go and ask the foundation to say, this was a current concern expressed. Is that a concern? Do the lawyers say, yeah, okay, that's a valid concern, or no, you say that's not really implying any commitment?
Yep. It would be cool if we get at least one chime in from somebody who's had to deal with something related to this, and then bring it to the group, maybe as part of the conversation on the pull request, and just say, let's take one final vote. Given the
So before we go for advice, for the legal advice, or after?
After. That way we make an informed decision. We already have everything else that's in this channel or this thread on this pull request. So let's just sprinkle in like an actual legal professional's opinion, if that's
right. Okay.
And then having that make a final decision.
Right. To see if anyone is better than the others. Okay. Yep. I can do that.
It's also worth pointing out that in the document itself, we do have a definition of what it means, right? The maintainer is interested in fixing. There should be no expectation on response times. So we do have a definition of that. So
right.
Just the keyword itself does not necessarily carry weight, because we do have. So.
Right, that's a fair, okay. And I'll make sure to include that in what I send, that says, whichever we choose, this is going to be the description which defines what it is. Okay, because yeah, that's a good point. I guess it's that you don't necessarily see the description, but yeah. Okay, I'll put that in, we'll get that, and then we can have a final, this is what they said, either there is a concern, not concern, what do we want to choose?
Yep.
Okay.
This gives me a flashback to, I saw a post one time about a guy getting a life sentence because untested code made it into a doctor's office, and he inadvertently, took somebody out. I was like, I imagine if he had had a good SLA in his package.json for his software, maybe, they could have shared the blame with the devs or something like that. But nope, just him by himself.
Okay.
It's good to have everything like clearly delineated and like clearly explained, rather than leaving things to chance. And yeah.
Okay, so I'm just going to take a note. Discussed. Michael to get foundation advice on this one. Okay, the next issue on the agenda was document the current top 10 Express issues, which is number 233. We don't have Wes today, but I know he's been, let's see, if we go look at the dashboard, I guess we're still sort of waiting to hear back from him that the dashboard is live. In parallel with that, Jarish, who's on our IBM team, is starting to engage as well with figuring out how to help with triage. And one of the things I hope to have an outcome for that is like some more documentation and PRs in the Express repo that says, hey, if you want to help triage, here's the process. So that's the other piece that I think we should make progress on the next few weeks. This week. So let's. Okay, so the next one on the agenda is 192, next steps on support levels in package.json. So I think this is where we have started to talk about, the blog on the support levels. I think we talked about, though, as kind of one of the main things was a blog that talked about, reintroduces what we've got and then highlights some of the controversial areas. And I know, Glenn, you'd started on that. So
I think with what I did when I started on that is I'm coming at this. So I know what we want to do, but I think we may have, because we've been engaged with this for a year or so, when I started writing a blog, I was thinking, hang on, most of the people coming into this have no idea we even exist. So we have to address that and address the thing, because there'll be no context. And like, if we start off and start talking about what we're going to put in package.json without giving the broader context. So what I needed now is I think I've got like the broad outline. We need like the meat of it, which I think I may need to get on a call with Emmanuel and maybe yourself and just get it down, because I can, and perhaps Edgar, we can write pretty fast, but we need more context now for getting the meat and potatoes in. So I'm just looking at, I was just looking at a comment from, I think Manuel, he did it 9 days ago. I'm just checking.
Yeah, which issue was that again?
So that was
blog post, right, 248.
248. So I have stuff written, and as you know, we just forked it. I need to talk with Emmanuel on this. I think we actually have to have a conversation to write it up. It's one of those things. I'm not quite sure if it's going to work. Us going backwards and forwards, because we're going backwards and forwards.
Sure.
But I think the action is I've got to set up some time with him, and I'm quite happy to sit down with him and do all the typing and whatnot. But we need to broaden the issue, because essentially what I've done is I've done a very broad introduction, but I've not actually gotten down to the problems we're trying to address with support.
Okay. So yeah, if you want to set up a meeting with Emmanuel and myself, maybe then we can go through and
I think so, yeah.
To sort of refine content direction. How about that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that is an item.
Sounds good. The next one is 164 baseline practices. .npm ignore.
So Joel Kip is working.
That's Joel and
well, Joel and Wesley we had our two different opinions, which we've both agreed to accommodate.
Right. So I guess we're looking just, we're waiting on Joel for the PR and. Okay. Joel for,
actually, I thought this was ready for, if I do remember, hang on, isn't this, wasn't this reviewed? Isn't
that's this one. Let's see. So sorry if I'm, is there a reference? Okay, wait a sec. Draft blog post. Okay, right. Yes. Okay. Right. Okay. Sorry. So here is the blog post. So. Okay, so I guess it's waiting. It could there's LJ still shows as a blocker. I say, do we think his comments have been addressed?
I thought they had.
Okay, I'm going to.
That's on poll 243. 240 is very popular.
Yeah, so I just commented on that saying, asking LJ if his comments have been addressed, because it looks like there have been a number of edits, and if he approves, I think then we should look to be moving forward. Okay, the next, anything else on that one before we move on? Okay, number 113, which problems Node.js OS maintainers face? I don't think there's anything specifically new on that front, other than, what we've been talking about on the Express side of things. Okay.
Did we onboard any other packages for like exploration? Are we talking with anybody else directly?
I think the next one, like Mateo's been involved a little bit in terms of MQTT. But I think, the Express has been the one we've been sort of most active on, and probably getting through that one in the boards and stuff, then we can see if some of the same stuff might help in the MQTT front. Makes sense.
Yeah, it's probably not a good idea to sign up for much more until we've actually done one and
Yes,
useful and engage your community and gotten people in to do stuff. We're probably going to learn a lot. It's like,
Yeah.
doing a startup.
Yeah. I was just thinking if we have what is it, multiple pots boiling or whatever, maybe one of them finishes sooner. But you're right, maybe focusing on one is the better the better plan.
Yeah, I think especially if we had somebody from some of the other packages who was very active and sort of helping to champion and push it, then maybe we could do more than one. But in the current state, I think continuing to push on the Express side and then, taking what we learned there to the other ones would make the most sense.
Yep.
Okay, the next one then on the agenda is number 244, which is CI published with two-factor auth for Teams. I think that was Dominicus, you added that on?
Yeah, well, we had a call with Wesley discussing that, and then he created that issue. And yeah, there's I'm looking forward to actually doing some more work on that specific problem. And the problem is that if you want to publish from CI, there is no way to enter a one-time password right now, right? There is no way to provide that second factor. You either basically have to store the published credentials on CI, which means that if somebody were to acquire that, they can do things with that. And there are several paths we can take there. The ideal ones are dependent on NPM, which is why I'm very happy Ahmad is here. So yeah, I'm wondering if you had a chance to look at any of those, and if there's anything we can talk about there. I'm also happy to take that offline to see if there's issues, or if there's like. I understand that like concrete commitments with dates, that's not something we're looking for, but just looking for options that we can look for.
So I'm a little. So go ahead. I
was gonna say, like, Darcy, who's been in these calls before, would have more of a direct view into that stuff. But this is something we're looking at as well, and how do we improve that experience overall?
So I'm interested to know, is this specific to the NPM two-factor implementation, or is it that, like, I can see for like GitHub, right? You get a secret which you can use as an alternative, which maybe you don't want to put into your CI, but at least you can. I remember there was at least one implementation though where you just couldn't even you didn't necessarily get that, and it also didn't give you the like the token. Some of the implementations, it gives you both. You can scan something and you can get a token which you can put into like an algorithm, or that would generate the one-time passwords for you.
Yeah, but then if you store that seed or the token, if you store that in CI, that's equivalent of a single factor. NPM does provide a second factor. Some systems do consider an IP restriction to be a second factor, and you can restrict NPM tokens by IP. But if you want the one-time password, at the moment in NPM, you can only provide it via command line. Or you can put it in NPM RC, but that's kind of pointless. What I've been working on, toying with the idea that was before the situation changed. So what I've been working is we played around with the idea of having a service which you can call, which then sends a notification to your phone, and then you can respond from your phone with a one-time password, and then the response gets sent back, which means that in CI you can curl a URL. It will hang until you respond, until you approve on your phone, and then you get the code and you pass it into NPM. It is a bit fiddly to implement, but it is one way around it. The problem with that is that it's something that Wes raised as well, is that you need to run that as a service somewhere.
Right.
And you are reliant on some provider to send notifications. There are two ways you can go. You can go through Firebase if you want to work with Google. You can use some sort of a third-party provider, but that's a cost, right? You're running servers and you're maintaining something. And you cannot delegate that completely to a third party because you're giving them access to your tokens potentially. Which sort of raises concerns, right? So what we've developed in Nearform is a PWA, where in your phone and only in your phone you have the seed, and you can respond to notifications, but that doesn't mean yet that you need to run a service to handle the actual communication. I know that Electron have a similar thing, and they do the notification communication through Slack. So you can sort of integrate, right? CI makes a request, a Slack bot says, please enter OTP. You enter OTP, Slack bot responds, or at least that's how I imagine it works. I haven't actually looked at the code just yet. So these are the various things. There's also various authentication providers that provide similar things, that provide a second factor through an API. And they do send notifications. So there's Duo Mobile, not to be confused with Google Duo, which is a completely different thing. There's Duo Mobile that provides an OTP thing. I think Authy has something similar. So these are ways of dealing with this without involving NPM. Ideally, you'd be able to install an NPM app on your phone and you'd click approve in there. But I know that it's a stretch and it's a long way to go before we get there. So I'm wondering, what are the options that NPM are able to provide? And if it's the case that, like, there's no capacity in the next 6 or 12 months, then we need to start working on a community solution for that, which is not a problem, just need to.
So aside from NPM's capacity and roadmaps, you also got to consider the number of available registry backends out there and whether or not the interoperability of those things will make sense. Like there's definitely a lot of scenarios that we know of, and some of us on the call maybe know of as well, like from their day-to-day, where you would be using both the public registry and a private registry that's either hosted or managed or whatever, kind of combination of the above. So like, how would such a solution work if the source of truth is not a single backend, and or any sort of middleware technology or something along those lines is not facilitating the need for multi-registry interfaces, right? So like that's a challenge. Of course, it's not a challenge that applies to everybody, but it's definitely a challenge that is real, that if you introduce anything that infirms or makes it solid opinions about how this would work, it needs to work across the board universally. So
right.
That's my only thought about that, aside from what we might or might not be able to do soon or not from like the NPM official registry side of things. And that's kind of a hindering aspect in the way we do things as well. Like any sort of change we introduce, we also got to be careful about not breaking everybody else's implementation of a registry interface. I
mean, my first thought as well is this doesn't sound NPM specific, in that if I'm a developer and I'm publishing packages for multiple languages, I don't necessarily want it to be different for each of those languages, right? So if I'm going to have to approve a publish for Maven or a publish for NPM, I prefer to have a common, whether it's the Slack or whatever it is, as opposed to something which is like, I got to have the NPM app, I got to have the Maven app, I got to have the. So I can see from that perspective, it also makes sense to say, if there's a generic solution, then, like the Slack one's kind of interesting in that, I guess you could have like, does that require anything on the NPM side, or is it just that like in your CI, you would basically have something that integrates into Slack to post the request, gets the response, and then sends it back? And then that would work for anything, right?
Yeah, that's roughly how it works. You do have to have an intermediate service that communicates. So you do make. I'll have to review the exact details of the Electron's internal implementation, the tool they use internally. They're planning to open source it, from what I understand. But you still need to make an HTTP request from your CI, and you get a response back eventually.
Right. That seems like a relatively low level integration point, in that, like, if it's a URL, you basically have some, there's something to make that easy in your CI, then the backend URL, if it's something that just posts it to Slack and you get the answer back, or you post it to some other messaging or even some automated app if you want to do that, right?
Yeah, I'll just repeat my point. So long as that doesn't break your ability to mix and match things on the backend. Again, it doesn't have to be NPM backend specific, but if introducing such a workflow means people can't use their private registries with Sonatype or JFrog or otherwise until such that those backend HTTP interfaces are also implemented, then it's limiting their usage. You know what I mean? I don't know if I'm articulating this very clearly.
But I think those HTTP interfaces would not be registry specific.
Yeah, exactly. This is a separate service outside of stuff. Yeah, the way you do it from CI, that's one way to go. However, I may better revisit that in an issue to describe.
Yeah. Okay.
We may not be talking about the same thing, but I see what you mean about the other services. But if they don't do OTP, or if they don't provide any other form of providing the OTP, then it's a separate thing.
Yeah, that's the part I mean. Like the OTP services, not like, or the OTP interface is not the registry interface themselves.
Yeah. Okay. I'll see if I can rephrase a suggestion and a proposal there.
Yeah, sounds like an interesting area anyway, in terms of figuring out what people can usefully do, and how, right?
I wish all the brand new registries supported second factor at all, because GitHub registry, I don't think it requires a second factor. Docker Hub does not. So yeah, at least we have OTP here.
Right. And so I guess the answer to my initial question is it's really nothing to do with NPM's implementation. You can get the seed out of at some point, and then you'd be able to put that into your own authenticator. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's a matter of accessing that authenticator programmatically from CI. But yeah, okay, I'll try to rephrase and see where we can implement. The other option there was discussed in the issue as some sort of staged release option, which would allow you to publish from CI and then to approve on the registry itself. But that's probably might be a significant change there. But yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of an interesting option in that it lets you decouple the two things, right? Sort of, you'd have a pending publish, and then you could go in and say, yeah, okay, these are all ones I understand. I don't know, Ahmad, have you ever thought of that on the NPM side, or?
No, honestly, that hasn't come up in conversation I was part of, but it's interesting.
Yeah, I was gonna say, does it make any sense to you, or is it like immediately, no, that makes no sense?
Like a staging area for packages is what you're saying.
Yeah, like they're basically they're pre-published, but for them to actually show up as being published, you need to go into the npm UI and say, yep, go.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that also gives you the extension of handling that in a team, whereby if you have multiple owners of the package, either one can approve. Whereas if you're doing OTP, then you have to have the token and you have to know exactly who is making the publish, which means more work.
Yeah, I mean, that still doesn't take away the need for a more granular level of published token management and 2FA around that. So like that becomes secondary to if that problem is solved, then introduce a second layer of pre-release packages that tokens can not require 2FA for. But you still have to solve the first problem.
How different would a pre-publish tagged release be from like a release candidate?
Implementation details, I guess, like depends on what the definition of those would mean for a community and an implementation of it.
Yeah,
but I don't believe that's a conversation that happened before, so interesting one to have.
In terms of like backwards compatibility, maybe reusing or extending the definition of something we already have, like release candidates now have a pre-publish option where you can immediately push them like with a lower overhead, but if you want them to be really published, there's this additional process that you can opt into.
Or equally, you can also, again, this is all hypotheticals, worthwhile having conversations, but not ones that have happened internally yet. But you can also like just associate that with SEMVer in general and just say, as a rule, anything that's major requires two-factor authentication. Anything that's not, meh. Right? Or depending on how you want to set up your own policy for your own team. But again, those are not conversations that we've had. It's interesting that we're having this ideation thing. It's probably worth taking that back and seeing what we can do with it.
Okay, any other conversation on that one before we move on? If not, I think we're at the top of the hour. We're 3 minutes away. So unless there's anything else that people would like to discuss, we'll call it for today. Okay, thanks.
It was
sorry, go ahead. Hold on.
Yeah, there was the discussion on the actual meeting issue about problems with CITGM, or rather some packages not passing there for version 13. Is there something that we can or should do? Invite people, point people to that or something?
Yeah, I don't know that. Let's see. So there's 7. Yeah, these depends. Like 0MQ, I think, like serial port. I don't know about Fastify. Some of them though, like, I guess it's like, is there anything in terms of helping or evangelizing about people being ready for a new version? Which is what these are. Some of them I think are native modules though that run into problems. Just looking, is there enough details to... Yeah, I mean, basically, yeah. So I think the 0MQ1 is, if they moved up to NAPI, it'd probably no longer be an issue. And that has been sort of, I think even there's an issue that was, just a sec, let me find that GitHub. API. Basically, the comment on 0MQ is there's a next generation version that is on the roadmap to be merged back into master. So I think if that happened, we wouldn't see problems with that one anymore. I maybe just will comment on that one. Let that go. For on the others, I'm not sure there's enough info in this, but I think really the answer more is, can we think of things that we should be doing to help? I mean, part of our testing suggestions are around testing LTS versions in current, encouraging people to test early. I don't think, like in terms of this is right now version 13, there's nothing we can do necessarily to fix the fact that these haven't been done in advance, but maybe what we could think of to do in the future, right?
Okay, possibly one for the next meeting there.
Right, like, yeah, is there some guidance, help, suggestions in terms of getting earlier testing and maybe more visibility of this particular list even, I wonder. Do you want to take the action to open an issue so that we discuss that?
Yeah, sure.
Next time?
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
I think we already have something about CITGM. Okay, I'll take a look, yeah.
Okay. Okay, anything else before we close out? Okay, thanks. Talk to everybody later. Bye.